Hello everyone and welcome to Sunburned Albino lists top 10 platformers of all time. Platforming is a genre that is closely tied to my gamer identity. I grew up with Mario on the NES, Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo, and Crash Bandicoot on the PlayStation, among other things. It's also a genre that creates discrepancies when making a list like this because tons of games have platforming in them, but wouldn't necessarily be called platformers by and large. So when selecting the games for this, I took into account how big of a role platforming played in the general gameplay, and decided based on which games really emphasized it. It's not an exact science though, so in the end I just put what felt right on here, and we all have to deal with it. I'm also limiting things to one game per franchise to get some variety out here. Let's get started. Number 10, Cuphead. Cuphead might have you shooting up the place with your fingertips, but platforming is integral to the proceedings, whether during some of the more frantic and demanding boss fights, or the run-and-gun levels, which are maybe even purer examples of jumpy goodness. These rankings aren't necessarily indicative of the overall quality of the games, but specifically how good they are as platformers. So like there will be games coming up that I don't like as much as I like Cuphead, but that I do consider to be better platformers. It's still all very biased and weird though, so don't get it twisted when it's already twisted. You have to be good at platforming to be good at Cuphead, especially in the grim matchstick fight, hopping off all those clouds, and the rumor Honeybottom battle with its rising honey tides and fragmented platforms, but pretty much every boss is gonna have you jumping and ducking and weaving through projectiles aplenty to collect all your soul contracts and deliver them to Satan like a good little mug, so Cuphead earns its spot at number 10. Number 9, Jak and Daxter, The Precursor Legacy. This isn't my favorite game in the series, I'm definitely a Jak 3 guy, but I do still enjoy this one, and it's much more centralized in platforming, before the franchise went all GTA for kids and started handing out guns and civilians to murder in the street. The rolling long jump maneuver in these games is still one of my favorite platforming mechanics of all time. It just feels good to use it to get around everywhere, even when you don't need to. The time of Jak and Daxter harkens back to a simpler time, a more innocent time in gaming, when laid-back games with cute mascots weren't just enjoyable, they were popular and in demand. Some games still carry that torch today, of course, but as Jak and Daxter's franchise evolved to this darker, grittier thing with the sequels, the gaming industry did too in a way, and now we praise Naughty Dog's work by being in awe of how realistic it looks when you stab someone in the throat. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Number 8, Donkey Kong Country. 90s kids had the best time growing up with video games, and I will die on this hill. Donkey Kong Country came out the year I was born, so I had to wait a few years to play it, but when I did, it helped to shape me into a gaming prodigy, because this game is decently hard. Lots of games back then were hard, so us kids were forged in the fires and tempered like steel, because if we wanted to keep playing games, we had to overcome the difficulty. Gaming was in this weird spot where the majority of games were catered to children, but the majority of games were also exceedingly difficult. They'd make a game and be like, "Look kids, it's a Bandicoot," while in the same breath being like, "Try to beat these broken bridge levels, you dumbass." Donkey Kong Country's version of broken bridges was broken minecart tracks. I remember those sections killing me so many times, especially if you killed yourself on purpose because you missed one of the Kong letters along the way. As a toddler, I didn't know what they spelled, I just knew I had to get that shit because it was gold and shiny. Some of the underwater levels were also a pain, especially the toxic green one towards the end with that section where the fish just keep swimming at you and you have to dodge past them. Since you can't get hit more than once without finding a respawn barrel for your partner or your toast, staying alive in a gauntlet like that is a big ask. Still, Donkey Kong Country was a blast, and none of the more modern ones on newer consoles really did it for me like this one did. Number 7, Little Big Planet. I'm still trying to relive my glory days from back when I played this game. I was never more motivated to collect anything anywhere than I was when getting all the prize bubbles in these levels, unlocking costumes and stickers to use in creating my own levels. It's a platformer that let me make the platformer, and I loved making platformers. With the online community able to play anything you created and vice versa, with player counts and hearts and comments, this was my first foray into the digital social marketplace, feeling like a true member of a community in a place where you could get noticed and develop a following. And not to brag, but I kinda did. Some of my levels got hundreds of thousands of plays, and I took probably too much pride in it, but screw it, that shit was intoxicating. I could never replicate it in Little Big Planet 2 or 3 though. In 2 it was because they heavily expanded the creation tools so people weren't even making platformers anymore, and in 3 the game spent the first year lagging its ass off and people didn't like it as much anyway. But back to the core of why Little Big Planet is on this list to begin with. The charm. It is so obnoxiously adorable, and with every story level made using the same creation tools they give to us, you can't help but be impressed while also seeing the potential of what others could accomplish. I'm a big Dreams fan, Media Molecule's most recent game where they let you make quite literally anything, but my soul still longs for a remake of Little Big Planet to bring the focus back to simplistic, endearing platforming. Also, Sackboy's Big Adventure is ass. Bring back LBP and the creation tools and the community. Number 6, Super Meat Boy. Back in 2010, you couldn't say the words hardcore platformer without imagining a square hunk of red juicy meat. I don't want to eat him, but I bet he does taste incredible. Super Meat Boy was a blistering test of skill, patience, and endurance, as fast-paced as it got, flinging yourself from one side of a level to another at breakneck speed trying to rescue your girlfriend from a fetus. In that sense, the game is just a really drawn-out abortion, but in a fun way with collectibles. Super Meat Boy was eventually ported from the Xbox 360 to the next generation of consoles, but lost all of its good music along the way, having switched composers and redone the soundtrack to the detriment of everyone. It's still sharp as ever, though, and holds up extremely well. Number 5, Neon White. I've had too many good reasons to talk about this game, so here's another one. Neon White is a speedrunning first-person shooter, but the platforming is front and center, discarding your gun cards to perform double jumps, air dashes, stomps, and more as you try to reach the end of the level as fast as neonically possible while having killed all the demons. The traversal is tight and smooth, and precision is everything in the name of shaving milliseconds off your time to ascend the leaderboards and earn different colored medals. I always say this when I talk about it, but I am not exaggerating when I proclaim Neon White to be the most purely fun game I've ever played. It's just perfect for what it is, and I love it. Number 4, Super Mario Odyssey. I originally had this game higher on the list, but then I thought about it and realized that the reason I love this game has less to do with the actual platforming than it does with all the things your platforming achieves, namely collecting moons. 3D Mario platforming has always been kinda slow and slippery, although not so much in Odyssey, which is to its credit and definitely a big part of why it's my favorite Mario game, but you still aren't gonna get that quick precision of other platformers. The good thing is you need it a bit less thanks to the open structure of the worlds, where the game generally doesn't require you to nail every jump or input. Super Mario Odyssey is a fun series of playgrounds to mess around in, and the collectathon aspect humongously elevates it. It's Mario's best platformer for sure in my mind, but some other games are still ahead of it. Number 3 is Celeste. Now, if you're looking for quick precision platforming, it really does not get better than Celeste. This is a game you can trust with your life, so whenever you die, you can be sure it's your own fault because the mechanics are flawless. Even though it's a hardcore platformer with very demanding skill checks, you still kind of feel more relaxed playing it than other more lax platformers because you can put your full trust in the game mechanics to work for you instead of against you. I don't know why Celeste is depressed in this game. She doesn't know how good she has it being in a game this good when she could have been the mascot for Phoenix Rage or something instead. If I had perfect jumping and dashing and climbing mechanics, I'd go scale a mountain too. Number 2, Ori and the Blind Forest. I'm choosing this Ori game over its sequel, The Will of the Wisps, because while that game has just as much platforming, it has more emphasis on its other offerings, like its improved combat mechanics, while The Blind Forest is more of a raw platforming entity. I once called Ori and the Blind Forest my favorite game of all time, but I probably have to go back to Kingdom Hearts 2 for that because of its historical significance throughout my childhood. Ori's absurdly gorgeous presentation, heartbreaking emotional moments, and, of course, flexibly smooth platforming made the first game I ever played on PC a very special one indeed. There's a fluidity to running and jumping in this game that is unmatched. It's not stiff or rigid, it flows like a summer breeze and feels like drinking a cool glass of water. It's not loose in a slippery way, it's bendy but precise, like you can land exactly where you want to land, but you don't feel suffocated in the process. Wall jumping, climbing, air dashes, triple jumps, projectile launches, you'll feel like a dick on a trapeze with all the acrobatics you can pull off. Ori and the Blind Forest is a brilliant platformer, and its sequel is one of the best games ever made, period. Number 1, Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. How did this game kill it so fucking hard out of nowhere? The original Crash trilogy is hailed as some of the greatest platformers of all time, and a different developer comes along with the IP and actually improves it. Crash 4 is leagues better than the Insane Trilogy remakes as well, because it doesn't carry over the horrendous hitboxes and slippery ledges from those games, and instead creates a Crash game that feels completely unique in what I assume is a new engine, because it at least feels like one. You run a little faster, you jump a little further, you've now got a yellow circle under your character so you can always tell where you're gonna land, which is supremely helpful given some of the lengthy spin jumps you'll have to do to progress. Even the boss fights are bangers. The engine boss fight in Crash 4 is the best boss encounter in the history of platformers, and I say it with my full chest. My jaw was almost on the floor at how fun and impressive it was. In a genre where so many boss fights are just jump on the guy's head 3 times while yawning, seeing this level of boss design in a platformer is like finding a unicorn that pees liquid gold. Crash 4 also has multiple characters with their own mechanics that feel different to play and yet are somehow all good and fun, plus you can unlock a biker skin for Coco which turns her into the #1 Bandicoot waifu. This game is a completionist nightmare. It took me 70 plus hours to get everything, but I loved every second that I wasn't grinding my teeth because the game never stopped being amazing, even as I was flinging my entire body at my monitor. I really like the time trials, but fuck the dev times. I only managed to get like 3 of those by accident when going for platinums. There is so much game to this game, and even though some people think the inverted levels are just recycled padding, I happen to think recycling is good for the environment, especially when they move stuff around and completely change how you approach the level. Plus, it lets me play the game more while giving me more stuff to unlock, and I call that a win. I wholeheartedly believe Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, is the best platformer ever created, and so it takes my #1 slot. Well, that's gonna do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Watch all my other videos while jumping up and down on a box, and I'll see you guys next time.